Lituya Bay, located in the southeastern part of Alaska, may appear to be a quiet, peaceful fjord, but it has a history of terrifying and destructive power that most people don't even know about. On July 9, 1958, Lituya Bay became the site of one of the most shocking natural events ever recorded, a mega tsunami that reached a mind-blowing height of 1,720 feet. To put that into perspective, that's taller than the Empire State Building, and no tsunami before or since has ever come close to matching that record. The event began with a massive landslide when an enormous chunk of rock, estimated to be around 30 million cubic yards in size, suddenly plunged into the bay. This was no ordinary landslide. The force of the rocks crashing into the water sent a powerful wave surging up and over the surrounding cliffs, creating a tsunami of catastrophic proportions. The wave tore through the narrow bay at an incredible speed, wiping out everything in its path. It was so powerful that it even stripped trees from the mountainsides, leaving behind a barren landscape where the lush forest had once stood. Despite how incredible and destructive the mega tsunami was, there were only a few eyewitnesses. The most well-known of these witnesses were the people aboard the fishing boat, the Lynn, a vessel that was near the bay when the event occurred. The crew of the Lynn had a front row seat to the incredible wave as it hurtled toward the shore. They managed to survive, but the impact of the mega tsunami left them in awe of nature's raw power. What happened at Lituya Bay in 1958 raises a lot of questions, some of which still don't have clear answers. How exactly did the landslide happen? Was it purely a natural event, or did human activity, such as logging or other environmental factors, contribute to the disaster? And could something like this happen again? The sheer magnitude of the mega tsunami's height and its unexpected nature have led to many speculations and studies over the years, but there's still no concrete understanding of all the factors involved. As scientists continue to study Lituya Bay and its unusual geography, the mystery deepens. The bay is surrounded by steep cliffs that create a narrow, confined space. This trapped environment amplifies the force of natural events, making Lituya Bay a particularly dangerous and unstable place. The landscape, combined with the ongoing tectonic activity in the region, sets the stage for even more potential disasters in the future. Scientists have learned that the same geological forces that caused the mega tsunami of 1958 are still at play today, meaning that Lituya Bay's danger has never fully passed. As we move forward, we'll dive deeper into the science behind what happened in 1958 and explore the ongoing risks that this place faces. Stay tuned as we continue this journey through one of the most fascinating and dangerous natural events in history. In order to understand the full scale of the 1958 mega tsunami in Lituya Bay, we need to explore the geological forces that made it possible. The event didn't happen randomly. The bay is situated in a region with a unique and volatile combination of factors that make it prone to natural disasters, especially ones as destructive as a mega tsunami. Lituya Bay is a narrow fjord, which means it's a body of water surrounded by steep, towering cliffs. The geography here is a major part of what turned a landslide into a record-breaking tsunami. When the rock slide occurred on that fateful day in July, the steep cliffs funneled the massive amount of energy from the falling debris into a concentrated area. This caused the water to rise with such force that the wave reached an unimaginable height. With nowhere for the energy to escape, the force of the water surged upward rather than spreading out over a larger area. It created a tsunami that was much more powerful than what you'd typically see in the open ocean, but what made this particular landslide so massive? For starters, the region around Lituya Bay is incredibly seismically active. The Pacific and North American tectonic plates are constantly shifting, and the pressure between them builds up over time. This ongoing movement of the Earth's crust can trigger massive earthquakes, which in turn can cause landslides. In fact, it's believed that the landslide that triggered the mega tsunami was caused by a relatively small earthquake, measuring about 7.8 on the Richter scale. While not a huge earthquake by some standards, it was enough to send tons of rock crashing into the bay. The landslide itself wasn't just a random event. It was part of the complex natural forces that had been at play in the region for thousands of years. The bay's geological history is filled with tectonic activity, and its physical structure makes it prone to events like this. With steep cliffs and a narrow channel, the water in Lituya Bay is essentially trapped in a confined space. When something like a landslide occurs, the water doesn't have much room to spread out, and it ends up pushing straight up and over the cliffs, creating a catastrophic wave. Adding to the danger of the bay is the region's high level of seismic activity. Earthquakes are a regular occurrence, and while most are small, larger ones can trigger events like the landslide that led to the mega tsunami. The energy released from these earthquakes can shake loose unstable rock formations, triggering massive rock slides into the bay. This, combined with the topography of the bay itself, creates a perfect storm for disaster. Understanding the geological makeup of Lituya Bay helps explain why this mega tsunami was so devastating, but it also raises important questions about future events. The forces at work here haven't gone away. In fact, they're still very much present. The same tectonic activity that triggered the 1958 disaster could cause similar events to occur again. With ongoing seismic activity in the region, Lituya Bay remains a place of concern for scientists studying the area. As we move on, we'll look at the aftermath of the mega tsunami and how scientists have studied its effects. Despite its terrifying nature, this event has provided valuable insights into the power of natural disasters and the ways we can better understand and prepare for them in the future. The aftermath of the 1958 Lituya Bay mega tsunami was both stunning and sobering. The destructive wave, which reached an unimaginable height of 1,720 feet, left an indelible mark on the landscape and offered valuable insights into the forces that shape our planet. In the hours and days following the disaster, scientists and survivors began to grasp the full scope of the devastation. The most immediate and visible effect of the mega tsunami was the widespread destruction of the surrounding forest. As the wave surged up the cliffs and crashed into the mountains, it stripped trees from the slopes, leaving behind a barren and eerie landscape. The water's sheer force was so great that it uprooted massive trees and left them scattered across the bay, some of them still floating in the water long after the event. The power of the wave was undeniable, and its impact on the environment was clear. Not only were trees destroyed, but the wave also caused significant erosion along the cliffs, leaving scars on the land that are still visible today. Remarkably, the mega tsunami's effects were not limited to just the surrounding environment. The local population, who lived in small villages near the bay, were lucky to escape the full force of the disaster. While there were no fatalities directly linked to the mega tsunami itself, the event did cause major disruptions to local communities. The destruction of land and wildlife affected the livelihoods of those who depended on the region's natural resources for survival. Despite the isolated nature of the bay, the force of the event was felt across the surrounding area, and the cleanup and recovery process was long and difficult. One of the most fascinating aspects of the 1958 mega tsunami is the fact that only a few people witnessed the event firsthand. A small number of boats were in the bay at the time, and while most were able to escape the brunt of the wave, one fisherman and his family were in a boat near the shoreline when the wave struck. Their accounts provide an eerie glimpse into the terrifying power of the disaster. As the wave hit, the water in the bay suddenly surged, and they reported seeing the mountain cliffs on either side of them disappear into a wall of water. The fisherman and his family were lucky to survive, but their experience is a vivid reminder of the destructive potential of such an event. The scientific community was quick to respond to the mega tsunami, conducting studies to understand its full scope and the forces that made it possible. Researchers used a combination of eyewitness accounts, geological surveys, and data from nearby seismic stations to piece together the puzzle of what had happened. What they discovered was a rare and unusual event that, while not common, could potentially happen again. The mega tsunami in Lituya Bay was not just a freak accident, but rather a reminder of the raw power that exists in Earth's geological processes. As researchers began to analyze the event, they realized that the Lituya Bay mega tsunami was unique, not only because of its extreme height, but also because of the specific conditions that made it possible. It was the perfect storm of seismic activity, topography, and geology that resulted in the massive wave. In a way, the disaster offered a rare opportunity for scientists to study how large-scale landslides and earthquakes can create such intense tsunamis, something they may not have been able to study under normal circumstances. Looking forward, scientists began to consider what the future might hold for Lituya Bay. While the region's seismic activity had been relatively stable in the years since the 1958 mega tsunami, the underlying geological factors that caused the disaster are still very much in play. The Pacific and North American tectonic plates continue to shift, and the possibility of another landslide or earthquake remains a real threat. But what makes Lituya Bay particularly dangerous is its location and its ability to amplify the effects of such events. The bay's narrow, enclosed shape funnels the energy of any seismic or landslide event directly into the water, making it a potential breeding ground for another mega tsunami. As we move forward in this story, it's important to consider how the Lituya Bay megatsunami has shaped our understanding of natural disasters and the science behind them. The lessons learned from this event continue to inform the ways we study and prepare for similar events in the future, highlighting the need for more research into the dynamics of earthquakes, landslides, and tsunamis. The events of July 9th, 1958 may be long behind us, but the lessons they left us with are still very much relevant today. As we reach the conclusion of the Lituya Bay megatsunami story, it's important to reflect on the lasting impact the event has had on both scientific research in the local area. The 1958 megatsunami was a game changer for the way we understand the power of nature and the destructive potential of tsunamis. Despite the rare and isolated circumstances of this event, it has sparked ongoing investigations into similar areas around the world, all of which have the potential to experience a similar catastrophe. One of the most significant consequences of the megatsunami was the heightened awareness it brought to the vulnerability of coastal areas that are situated near active geological zones. As a result, scientists began to study how earthquakes and landslides could trigger tsunamis in other regions with similar topographical and seismic conditions. While Lituya Bay is an extreme case, the principles of how it all unfolded have been applied to better understand tsunamis in general, especially those that might occur along the Pacific Ring of Fire, where tectonic activity is high. Although there were no fatalities directly linked to the megatsunami, the disaster highlighted the importance of early warning systems and preparedness in regions at risk for tsunamis. The speed at which the waves surged through Lituya Bay left little time for people to respond, making it clear that places with a history of seismic activity need to be on high alert. In the years following the event, efforts to improve tsunami warning systems became a priority for many coastal regions around the world. Scientists also started to look more closely at the effects of large landslides and how they could trigger waves, a crucial element in preventing or mitigating future disasters. The unique and isolated geography of Lituya Bay has also made it a focal point for geological studies. Researchers continue to study the bay and its surroundings to this day, gathering data on its ongoing seismic activity and the state of its landscape. The potential for another major landslide or earthquake is still very much a possibility, and while it may be impossible to predict exactly when or where the next catastrophic event will strike, the lessons learned from the 1958 megatsunami have paved the way for better preparedness and understanding of similar events elsewhere. What is perhaps most striking about the Lituya Bay megatsunami is the sheer power of nature. It serves as a reminder that even in the most peaceful and remote locations, the Earth's forces are always at work, shaping and reshaping the landscape in ways we can't always predict. This disaster may have been an extreme and rare event, but it's one that serves as a warning that nothing on Earth is immune from the power of natural forces. In the years since the disaster, the memory of the megatsunami has lingered, both in the scientific community and in the local memory. It stands as a testament to nature's ability to surprise us and remind us of how little control we truly have over the forces that shape our world. Lituya Bay may seem quiet and peaceful today, but it still holds the potential for the kind of sudden, devastating event that forever alters the landscape. As we finish reflecting on the events of July 9th, 1958, it's clear that Lituya Bay continues to be a unique geological and environmental location that holds important lessons for all of us. It's a reminder that while we may not be able to control or fully predict these catastrophic events, understanding and respecting the natural world around us is essential for surviving and navigating the unpredictability of life on Earth. And who knows, perhaps one day scientists will uncover even more secrets hidden in the depths of Lituya Bay. Until then, we continue to study, learn, and prepare, taking the lessons of the past to better understand the future. December of 1952, London was no stranger to fog, but this fog was unlike anything anyone had seen before. It wasn't just a thick mist that blurred the city's streets, it was a deadly, choking shroud that settled over the sprawling metropolis like a silent predator. For 5 long days, London was enveloped in this toxic haze, a dangerous blend of coal smoke and unusual weather that quietly took thousands of lives. The Great Smog wasn't just a natural event, it was a man-made disaster that forever changed how people think about the air they breathe. In this video, we'll take you through those terrifying days, share the stories of those who lived through it, and reveal how this catastrophe sparked major changes in environmental laws. This is the story of the Great Smog, an environmental nightmare that shook a city and a nation to its core. To understand just how the Great Smog came to be, we need to step back to post-war London. The city was still recovering from the damage of the Second World War, but was also alive with industry and activity. The winter of 1952 was especially bitter and cold, and nearly every home relied on coal fires to keep warm. But Londoners were not burning the best quality coal. Much of the cleaner, higher-grade coal was being exported to support the post-war economy. Instead, they used cheaper, low-grade coal that contained high levels of sulfur. This meant that millions of homes were sending thick, sulfur-laden smoke into the air every day. At the same time, factories and coal-fired power stations like Battersea and Lots Road were continuously pumping out massive clouds of smoke and pollutants. London was no stranger to fog and smog, but industrial pollution had turned these hazy pea soupers into a regular, grim presence. People had grown used to the smoky air, accepting it as part of city life, but all these conditions set the stage for something far worse, waiting on one last critical factor: the weather. On Friday, December 5th, 1952, the weather took a turn that would change everything. A strong high-pressure system called an anticyclone settled over London, bringing with it unusually cold temperatures. This weather pattern created what meteorologists call a temperature inversion, a layer of warm air trapped above colder air near the ground. Normally, the air near the surface would rise, carrying pollution away, but this inversion acted like a lid, trapping the cold air and all the pollutants beneath it. Without any wind to disperse the smoke from homes, factories, and power stations, the thick, toxic air began to build rapidly. By nightfall, the fog transformed into a choking, yellow-black cloud, so dense that visibility dropped to just a few feet in some areas. People could barely see their own feet as they moved through the streets, and the air was heavy with a bitter smell of sulfur and coal smoke. This wasn't ordinary fog anymore, of course. It was a deadly, concentrated mixture of smoke, sulfur dioxide, and other harmful chemicals, marking the beginning of the Great Smog's suffocating grip on London. When Saturday, December 6, 1952 arrived, the sun struggled to break through the thick, toxic fog that still blanketed London. Instead of lifting, the smog clung stubbornly to the city, trapping people inside a dim yellow haze that made every breath painful. For the next 3 days, until Monday, December 8th, the city was engulfed in this heavy, poisonous cloud that seeped into homes, schools, and hospitals alike. Visibility remained dangerously low, causing chaos on the streets where buses and cars ground to a halt because drivers simply couldn't see. Only the underground trains continued to run, serving as a lifeline through the choking smog above. Emergency workers were overwhelmed, struggling to reach those suffering from severe respiratory distress, as countless people pressed damp cloths to their faces to try and filter the foul air. The smog even took a deadly toll on animals. Cattle at markets reportedly suffocated, and pets and wildlife were also affected by the toxic atmosphere. Life in London during those days became a desperate fight to survive under a sky that seemed to suffocate the city itself. The breakthrough came on Tuesday, December 9th, when a shift in weather finally began to clear the deadly smog hanging over London. Winds picked up, dispersing the thick, toxic blanket that had suffocated the city for 5 relentless days. As the fog lifted, the grim reality of the disaster became apparent. Hospitals were flooded with patients struggling to breathe, many suffering from bronchitis, pneumonia, and severe oxygen deprivation. The most vulnerable were the elderly, young children, and those already battling heart or lung conditions. Their bodies simply could not withstand the assault of pollutants. Early official estimates suggested around 4,000 deaths directly linked to the smog, but this number soon proved to be a severe underestimate. Over the following months, mortality rates remained unusually high, revealing that the true death toll was closer to 12,000. Beyond the fatalities, more than 100,000 people experienced serious illnesses caused by the toxic air. This tragic event marked one of the deadliest environmental disasters in modern history, showing just how lethal unchecked pollution could be. In the weeks and months following the Great Smog, London was gripped by a deep sense of shock and mourning. The true scale of the disaster was impossible to ignore, despite some early attempts by officials to downplay the smog's role or attribute the deaths to a flu epidemic. Newspapers vividly described the overwhelming suffering, and stories from survivors painted a grim picture of a city struggling to breathe. Public anger grew as more became clear about how many lives had been lost due to polluted air. Funerals became so frequent that florists reportedly ran out of flowers. Medical professionals and scientists worked tirelessly to analyze the data, confirming a direct link between the smog and the surge in respiratory illnesses and fatalities. Pressure mounted on the government to confront the long-ignored problem of air pollution. This tragedy forced the nation to face a hard truth. London's chronic pollution had a deadly price. The Great Smog had shattered any remaining tolerance for dirty air, sparking calls for urgent action to prevent such a catastrophe from ever happening again. The overwhelming public outrage and undeniable scientific evidence finally pushed the government to act. In response, a committee led by Sir Hugh Beaver was formed to investigate the causes and consequences of the Great Smog. Their findings clearly identified the burning of coal in homes and factories as the main source of the deadly pollution. This paved the way for the Clean Air Act of 1956, a landmark piece of legislation aimed at reducing air pollution across the United Kingdom. The act introduced smoke control areas, where only smokeless fuels could be used, forcing a shift away from the sulfur-heavy coal that had plagued London's air for decades. Factories were required to install cleaner technology and build taller chimneys to disperse smoke more effectively. Grants were also offered to households to help transition from coal fires to cleaner heating methods such as gas, oil, or electricity. Though change did not happen overnight, London experienced another smog event in 1962, less severe but still concerning. The Clean Air Act marked a turning point. It signaled a new era of government responsibility for public health and environmental protection, ultimately helping to clear London's skies and reduce deadly smog for good. The Great Smog of 1952 left a legacy that extends far beyond London's borders. It became a crucial case study in understanding the severe health impacts of air pollution, influencing research and policies worldwide. Studies showed that the effects were not limited to the immediate crisis. Death rates remained elevated for months after the event. Furthermore, scientists now believe that those exposed to the smog as infants or even before birth faced long-term health risks, including higher chances of asthma and potential cognitive effects. The disaster fundamentally shifted public perception, transforming air pollution from an unfortunate but accepted byproduct of progress into a recognized public health emergency. The success of the Clean Air Act demonstrated that government intervention could improve air quality significantly. Today, London's air is much cleaner, thanks in part to ongoing efforts like the ultra-low emission zone, which targets modern pollution sources such as traffic emissions. Despite these advances, air pollution remains a critical global challenge, causing millions of premature deaths every year, especially in rapidly industrializing regions. The Great Smog stands as a powerful reminder of the deep connection between the environment and human health, and why vigilance and action remain essential to protect clean air for future generations. The Great Smog of 1952 was far more than just a severe weather event. It was a man-made disaster rooted in heavy reliance on coal and unfortunate atmospheric conditions. For 5 terrifying days, London was engulfed in a toxic fog that silently claimed thousands of lives, halted a city, and exposed the deadly consequences of polluted air. The immense toll of sickness and death served as a harsh awakening, sparking a demand for change. This tragedy directly led to groundbreaking legislation like the Clean Air Act of 1956, which transformed environmental policy in the UK and inspired similar efforts worldwide. Over time, London's skies cleared, and the once constant pea supers became a dark chapter in history rather than an everyday reality. Yet the memory of those days remains a crucial lesson about the dangers of unchecked pollution. It reminds us that our health is deeply tied to the environment we create, and that proactive steps are necessary to protect the air we all share. The Great Smog's legacy is a story of both devastating loss and hopeful transformation, proving that even the darkest crises can lead to lasting progress. Thank you for watching. If you found this video insightful, please like and subscribe for more historical stories. In the heart of Montana, near the edges of Yellowstone National Park, the Madison River winds through towering pines and rugged canyons. It was a place where families came to camp, fish, and escape the heat of summer. On the night of August 17, 1959, hundreds of people were asleep in tents and trailers along Hebgen Lake and the Madison River, unaware they were directly above one of the most active fault zones in North America. At exactly 11:37 p.m., the Earth unleashed a violent tremor that would change the landscape forever. The ground didn't just shake, it tore apart, sending massive rock and soil sliding down the canyon walls. An entire mountainside weighing over 60 million tons was about to crash into the Madison River, creating a new lake in the process. Campers and residents would experience sheer terror as the earth split beneath them, while those lucky enough to be on higher ground watched in disbelief as chaos erupted. This is the story of Montana's Hebgen Lake earthquake, a natural disaster that reshaped the land and left a lasting mark on everyone who witnessed it. August 1959 was peak tourist season in southwestern Montana, and the area around Hebgen Lake was alive with activity. Campers set up along the shore and in the Rock Creek public campground, filling the air with laughter, campfires, and the smell of pine and grilled meals. Families came from across the country to fish the Madison River, hike the surrounding hills, and sleep under the vast Montana sky. Hebgen Lake itself was held back by an earth-filled dam completed in 1914, which had kept the lake stable for decades. The river carved deep canyons that were both beautiful and precarious, with cliffs rising sharply from the water's edge. As evening fell on August 17th, the campers zipped their sleeping bags and settled into trailers, completely unaware of the immense pressure building along the intermountain seismic belt beneath them. The fault lines in the region had been gradually accumulating stress for years, and that night the rock was ready to break. For a few fleeting hours, everything seemed normal, the calm beam before a disaster that would strike in a matter of seconds. At exactly 11:37 p.m. on August 17, 1959, the ground beneath Hebgen Lake ruptured with unimaginable force. The quake registered between 7.2 and 7.3 in magnitude, making it the strongest ever recorded in Montana. For roughly 30 to 40 seconds, the earth bucked, rolled, and twisted, throwing campers and trailers alike into chaos. Sections of U.S. Highway 287 fractured and slid into the lake, cutting off the main route along the Madison River. Fault scarps appeared throughout the area, with the ground dropping as much as 20 feet in some places, creating sudden cliffs where flat ground had existed moments before. The lake itself became unstable, and massive waves, known as a seiche, roared across its surface, some reaching 20 feet in height and surging repeatedly over the Hebgen Dam. Witnesses reported a deafening roar, louder than thunder, as the land shifted violently under their feet. The event reshaped the landscape in an instant, leaving an eerie aftermath that foreshadowed the coming devastation and set the stage for the collapse of an entire mountainside. As the ground continued to shake, the south face of Sheep Mountain, looming over Madison Canyon, suddenly gave way. Over 60 million tons of rock, dirt, and trees broke free and surged down the slope at speeds estimated near 100 miles per hour. The massive landslide completely buried the Madison River and created a temporary dam more than 200 feet high and nearly 3/4 of a mile wide. Debris struck the opposite canyon wall with such force that it propelled trees and boulders hundreds of feet upward. The blast of air generated by the slide was hurricane force, tossing vehicles, trailers, and camping equipment like toys. In its path lay the Rock Creek campground, where dozens of tents and trailers were obliterated, leaving only a small number of survivors on the edges. The slide forced water out of the river channel, sending a wall of muddy, churning water across the canyon. Within minutes, a peaceful summer night had been transformed into a scene of total devastation, and anyone in the valley had no choice but to face the sudden and violent wrath of nature. In the immediate aftermath of the landslide, campers and families were trapped in total darkness, surrounded by dust, falling debris, and the roar of aftershocks. Many survivors relied purely on luck and quick thinking to escape. Grover and Lillian Malt, a couple in their 70s, clung to a tree as their trailer was swept into the Madison River, holding on for hours in freezing water until morning rescue. Irene Bennett Dunn found herself pinned under a fallen tree, her leg broken, with only her son Phil able to respond to her calls. They were the sole survivors from their family. Other families scrambled to find high ground as waters surged over the riverbanks, while the deafening noise of shifting rock and cascading water drowned out any calls for help. Among the heroes of the night was Nurse Tootie Green, who immediately began treating the injured with what little supplies she had, improvising bandages from towels and clothing in the dark. For many, survival came down to staying calm, assessing the hazards, and helping one another navigate through the chaos. The hours were long, the danger unrelenting, and the landscape forever altered as the quake and slide left its mark on every canyon wall and shoreline. By the morning of August 18th, the full scale of the disaster became clear. The Madison River Canyon was completely isolated, blocked by the massive landslide, and the main highway was destroyed, leaving survivors stranded with no easy escape. Early reports came through a local ham radio operator in West Yellowstone, alerting authorities to the dire situation. Rescue operations began immediately, with the U.S. Forest Service deploying smoke jumpers to parachute into the hazardous area and provide first aid. Helicopter pilots from Hill Air Force Base played a crucial role, landing on unstable ground to evacuate the injured. One pilot, Ray Gerlach, personally rescued 21 people. Bulldozer crews worked around the clock to create a makeshift road to allow additional survivors to reach safety. Officials also realized the landslide had created a natural dam, and water pooling behind it threatened catastrophic flooding downstream, prompting the evacuation of the town of Ennis. These coordinated efforts over the following days were critical in preventing further loss of life and stabilizing the area, setting the stage for engineers to later create a controlled spillway and form what would become Quake Lake. The 1959 Hebgen Lake earthquake left a lasting mark on Montana, claiming 28 lives and causing $11 million in damages, the equivalent of over $119 million today. 19 of the victims were lost in the landslide, and their bodies were never recovered. Scientists flocked to the area to study the dramatic fault scarps and massive landslide, gaining a unique opportunity to better understand seismic hazards in the Rocky Mountains. Yellowstone National Park, just next door, also experienced dramatic changes. Dozens of hot springs and geysers became active, some erupting for the first time in recorded history, including Sapphire Pool, which began shooting water more than 150 feet into the air. The natural dam formed by the landslide forced engineers to act quickly, carving a controlled spillway and stabilizing the water level to prevent catastrophic downstream flooding. Quake Lake remains today as both a serene and haunting reminder of that night, with ghostly tree trunks still standing in the water as a testament to the violence of the landslide. The U.S. Forest Service manages the Madison River Canyon earthquake area, and a visitor center on top of the landslide offers panoramic views, while a large boulder with a plaque commemorates those who lost their lives. This disaster, marked by both human tragedy and scientific discovery, continues to teach lessons about the unpredictable power of nature and the resilience of those who survived. In September of 1959, one of the most devastating natural disasters in Japanese history struck the nation, Typhoon Vera. It would go on to become the deadliest typhoon to ever hit Japan, leaving behind a path of destruction that would change the lives of millions. The typhoon's powerful winds, which reached speeds of up to 160 miles per hour, and relentless rainfall wreaked havoc on communities, infrastructure, and families across the country. It made landfall on September 26th, with its fury felt most intensely in the central and western regions of Japan. Typhoon Vera began its journey in the western Pacific Ocean on September 20th. It started as a low-pressure system, a common precursor to typhoons, but rapidly strengthened, gaining intensity as it moved toward Japan. The storm's trajectory was almost perfectly aligned to bring it over Japan's main islands. The warm waters of the Pacific Ocean fed the storm, making it grow even stronger as it neared land. By the time it hit Japan, it was already classified as a super typhoon, a term used for storms with sustained winds over 150 miles per hour. The typhoon's impact was felt across a vast area. One of the hardest hit regions was the city of Nagoya, which was submerged by the immense storm surge. The water flooded entire neighborhoods, leaving residents trapped in their homes with no way to escape the rising floodwaters. Along with the storm surge, the relentless rainfall caused rivers to overflow, leading to widespread flooding in towns and villages. As the typhoon roared through, the power was knocked out in many areas, and communication lines were cut off, making rescue efforts even more difficult. The destruction was widespread. Entire communities were decimated, with thousands of homes washed away by the floodwaters or destroyed by the ferocious winds. The physical toll was catastrophic, but the emotional and psychological impact was just as severe. Many people were forced to flee their homes, abandoning everything they had. In some cases, families were separated, unsure if they would ever see their loved ones again. As the storm raged on, the people of Japan found themselves at the mercy of nature's fury. Typhoon Vera's aftermath was nothing short of catastrophic. The official death toll would eventually rise to over 5,000, and many more were injured. The storm left millions of people homeless, displaced by the widespread destruction. Beyond the physical damage to homes and buildings, the typhoon also devastated Japan's economy. With so many industries impacted, people found themselves without jobs and livelihoods, and the country faced a long and difficult recovery process. It would take years for the country to rebuild, and the emotional scars left by the disaster would linger long after the physical damage was repaired. In the immediate aftermath of the typhoon, the Japanese government and emergency services faced immense challenges. The storm's power had left many areas completely inaccessible, and it was days before emergency workers could reach the worst-hit regions. The scale of the disaster was overwhelming, and at first there was little anyone could do to help. People relied on each other for survival, with neighbors coming together to help those in need. Despite the challenges, the resilience of the Japanese people began to shine through as they started the slow and painful process of recovery. Typhoon Vera's legacy would have a profound impact on Japan. It led to changes in disaster preparedness and response, with the government implementing more robust early warning systems and evacuation protocols. While the storm brought unspeakable tragedy, it also shaped the way Japan would handle future natural disasters. The lessons learned from Typhoon Vera continue to influence how the nation prepares for typhoons and other natural events today. The moment Typhoon Vera made landfall on September 26, 1959, it was clear that this storm would leave a mark on history. With winds roaring at over 160 miles per hour and relentless rains, the impact was felt almost immediately. The typhoon's arrival was terrifying, as it came ashore with a force rarely seen in Japan's history. The combination of the high winds and torrential rainfall created a deadly scenario, with homes, roads, and entire towns being wiped away in a matter of hours. In the days leading up to the typhoon's arrival, the government had issued warnings and urged people to evacuate coastal areas, but the scale of the disaster was far beyond what anyone had anticipated. As the storm slammed into Japan's central and western regions, the damage was not just from the winds, but also from the storm surge, which caused flooding in areas that were not even directly hit by the typhoon's winds. The surge brought massive waves that inundated towns along the coast, sweeping away anything in its path. Entire neighborhoods were submerged, and the floodwaters rose quickly, making it difficult for anyone to escape. One of the most shocking consequences of Typhoon Vera was the disruption of Japan's infrastructure. Roads, bridges, and railways were destroyed, leaving many people stranded in places that were difficult or impossible to reach. In some areas, the floodwaters were so deep that they cut off entire communities, leaving people without access to food, water, or medical care. The loss of power across vast areas meant that communications were cut off, making it nearly impossible for rescue teams to coordinate. For those in affected regions, the isolation was a terrifying experience, with no idea when help would arrive. The survivors of Typhoon Vera were left with unimaginable challenges. Many people had lost everything: homes, possessions, and in some cases, loved ones. The typhoon had torn apart the very fabric of communities, and the survivors faced the difficult task of rebuilding not only their homes, but their lives. The sense of loss was overwhelming, and many were left with nothing but the clothes on their backs. For those who had escaped the worst of the storm, the trauma of what they had witnessed was something they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. In the aftermath, the damage was so extensive that Japan struggled to assess the full extent of the destruction. In some regions, it would take days, even weeks, before the true impact of the storm became clear. The country was forced to rely on whatever resources were available to begin recovery efforts. Emergency shelters were set up, and relief teams worked tirelessly to provide food, water, and medical assistance. Despite these efforts, the scale of the devastation meant that it would take months, if not years, for the country to fully recover. Japan's government would later face intense scrutiny over its preparedness for such a massive disaster, but in the immediate aftermath, the focus was on survival and recovery. As Japan began the slow process of rebuilding, the emotional scars of Typhoon Vera remained. Survivors often spoke of the horror they had experienced, from the deafening winds to the terror of watching their homes be destroyed by floodwaters. The stories of loss and survival were heartbreaking, and many felt that their lives would never be the same. Yet through all the devastation, there was also a sense of hope. The people of Japan came together to help one another, showing incredible resilience in the face of disaster. It was this strength and determination that would help Japan rise from the ashes of Typhoon Vera and begin the long process of recovery. The lessons learned from Typhoon Vera would go on to shape Japan's disaster preparedness strategy for years to come. While the nation would never forget the horror of that day, the tragedy would also push for advancements in forecasting, evacuation protocols, and response systems. Typhoon Vera's legacy was not just about the lives lost and the destruction left behind, but also about the changes it spurred in how Japan would face future natural disasters. As Typhoon Vera continued its devastating path across Japan, it left behind a trail of destruction that was hard to comprehend. The hardest hit areas were those in central Japan, where cities like Nagoya were caught in the full force of the storm. The damage was so severe that the city, once bustling and full of life, was reduced to a scene of chaos and despair. The floodwaters rose so high that they submerged buildings, streets, and entire neighborhoods. People trapped in their homes were forced to seek higher ground, many of them losing everything they had worked for. In the wake of the typhoon's fury, rescue efforts became an urgent priority. However, the damage to the infrastructure made it difficult for emergency services to reach the most affected areas. Roads were impassable, railways were down, and airports were rendered useless due to the widespread flooding and destruction. For many survivors, the first few days after the storm were marked by uncertainty and fear. They were isolated and cut off from the outside world with little hope of immediate help. One of the most heart-wrenching aspects of the aftermath was the sheer number of people who had lost their lives. The death toll, which eventually surpassed 5,000, was a grim reminder of the typhoon's destructive power. In addition to the loss of life, there was also the immense damage to property, which left millions homeless. Families who had once lived comfortably found themselves displaced and without shelter, while businesses were forced to shut down as they struggled to rebuild. Entire communities were left devastated, and the task of recovery seemed nearly impossible. The damage to agriculture was another significant consequence of the typhoon. Fields of crops, which were vital to the livelihoods of many rural communities, were washed away by the floodwaters. This loss of crops added to the already dire situation, as food shortages became a concern in many areas. With the infrastructure in ruins, transportation of supplies was slow, and many people were left without the essentials they needed to survive. The local economy, which had already been strained by the storm, faced even further setbacks as businesses struggled to get back on their feet. Despite the overwhelming challenges, the people of Japan did not give up. As the days passed and the waters receded, the survivors began to rebuild their homes and their lives. Volunteers from across the country arrived to help with the recovery efforts, providing food, water, and medical assistance to those in need. The government worked tirelessly to restore basic services like electricity and clean water, though it would take time for many areas to fully recover. The emotional toll on the survivors was also immense. Many had lost loved ones, and the trauma of witnessing such devastation was something they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. The stories of those who lived through the storm were filled with heartache and loss, but they also reflected the strength of the human spirit. People came together to support one another, offering whatever help they could to those in need. While the scars of Typhoon Vera would remain for years, the resilience and solidarity of the Japanese people became a beacon of hope in the face of tragedy. Typhoon Vera also marked a turning point in Japan's approach to disaster management. The scale of the destruction revealed the vulnerabilities in the country's infrastructure and emergency response systems. It was clear that more needed to be done to prepare for such devastating events in the future. The government, alongside experts in meteorology and disaster management, began to focus on improving early warning systems, enhancing evacuation plans, and strengthening the infrastructure to withstand future storms. These lessons learned from the tragedy of Typhoon Vera would go on to save countless lives in the years to come. The recovery process from Typhoon Vera was long and difficult, but it laid the foundation for a stronger, more resilient Japan. The lessons learned from the disaster were not just about how to prepare for future storms, but also about the importance of community and the strength of people coming together in times of crisis. The impact of Typhoon Vera would be felt for decades, but its legacy also served as a reminder of the importance of preparedness, unity, and hope in the face of adversity. As the months passed and the initial shock of Typhoon Vera's destruction began to fade, Japan's recovery continued at a slow and painstaking pace. The immediate focus was on providing shelter, food, and medical care to the millions of people left, homeless or displaced. Relief efforts were in full swing, with both the government and private organizations working tirelessly to deliver aid to those in need. Temporary shelters were set up in schools, community centers, and other public buildings where survivors could find safety and support. However, the real challenge lay in rebuilding homes, schools, and businesses that had been destroyed in the storm. The Japanese government took a central role in coordinating the recovery efforts, focusing on clearing debris, restoring essential infrastructure like water and power supplies, and rebuilding transportation networks. Roads and bridges that had been swept away by the floodwaters were rebuilt, and damaged railways were repaired to allow for the movement of goods and people. The recovery was far from easy, and many areas remained in ruins for weeks or even months after the typhoon had passed. Yet despite these difficulties, Japan showed a remarkable ability to rebound from such a catastrophic event. One of the most significant aspects of the post-Typhoon Vera recovery was the shift in Japan's approach to disaster preparedness and response. The scale of the devastation had exposed critical weaknesses in the country's ability to handle such disasters, particularly in the areas of early warning systems and emergency management. In the years following the typhoon, Japan implemented major changes to its disaster preparedness programs. New infrastructure was built to withstand the impact of future typhoons, and the government introduced more advanced weather monitoring systems to provide earlier warnings to residents in danger zones. These improvements were aimed at ensuring that future storms would not have the same devastating impact. The emotional toll on the survivors of Typhoon Vera also left a lasting mark on the nation. Many people carried the trauma of losing loved ones or witnessing the destruction of their communities. However, in the face of this pain, the strength and resilience of the Japanese people shone through. Community groups, local volunteers, and national organizations came together to support those who had lost everything, offering assistance in the form of food, clothing, and financial aid. The recovery was not only a physical one, but also an emotional one, as the country worked to heal from the scars of the typhoon. In the years following the disaster, the memory of Typhoon Vera continued to shape Japan's approach to disaster management. The lessons learned from the storm became a crucial part of the country's disaster response strategies, with an emphasis on preparedness, quick response, and community support. Typhoon Vera was no longer just a tragic event in history. It was a turning point that led to significant improvements in how Japan dealt with natural disasters. The legacy of Typhoon Vera is still felt today, with the country continuing to invest in disaster resilience and risk reduction. The importance of building stronger infrastructure, improving early warning systems, and fostering a culture of preparedness became clear. The lessons from the typhoon, while painful, were transformative, shaping the way Japan faces future challenges from nature's unpredictable force. As Japan looks to the future, the memory of Typhoon Vera serves as both a somber reminder of the devastation that natural disasters can bring and a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The country's ability to recover and rebuild after such a catastrophic event is a story of hope and strength in the face of overwhelming adversity. Typhoon Vera may have left behind a trail of destruction, but it also sparked a movement towards a more prepared and resilient Japan, where communities are better equipped to face the challenges of the future.